Hey, this is David with Hagerty, our Will It Run series. Last episode, you saw that I said, hey, this Challenger deserves a little more loving. So, it's back at our shop, just like that. And it is going to get exactly that little more loving because I didn't like the fact that it really didn't want to idle all that great, and I wanted to make it drivable. I think a lot of it is a vacuum issue, vacuum leak, but until I get the cherry pits out of the way, yeah, I'm not touching it. So, with that, Ben and John, they're gonna get to work, and I'm gonna go play. Well, you can see that, Ben and John did a nice job cleaning things up. Looks a whole lot better. And I can actually see the top of the intake manifold now. So, like I said earlier, I believe one of the issues I have is with this running is an intake leak or a vacuum leak. Now, vacuum only comes from the top side of the motor, not the bottom side. So I'm just going to go right straight to the bottom gasket, which is the intake gasket, and pull that off. Now, did I go through and do all my checks? Yes. In fact, while they were off messing around doing some other stuff, I put a vacuum gauge on it and started it up, and you can see this gauge is just floundering all over the place. So I'm going to get my hands dirty and get the new intake gasket on. I'm replacing that red ground wire because that's disturbing me. And as I mentioned earlier, in fact, if you didn't catch it, we tried to use the fuel tank and the pump, and we were going to flush it out during the first episode when we got this running, but it's blocked or this is no good. So I'm going to take an old pump out. I'm going to flush the line because we wouldn't want to have junk in the line, obviously, and put a fresh pump on it. Then we can use our mechanical pump to feed the carburetors instead of the boat tank and the electric pump, although it does work. Yep, let's get going. I'm going to pull, well, unfortunately I got to drop the coolant. So I have a drain pan underneath there. Drain pan slash part storage pan, works well. We're going to store the coolant in there. Yeah. And let's see if this will turn. Oh, look at that, just like it's meant to do it. It's going to take a while to drain 4 gallons of coolant that way. Well, I can make my time useful while that's draining though by getting the carburetors out of the way. Pretty sure his name's Jerry. We'll worry about this off the car. All right. So something I want to make a point of here is for all you going through and going, why is he going right to the intake gasket? Well, tell you what, I already have to pull the carburetors because all the carburetors need to be gone through and are missing half the linkage. So I have to address that anyway. And while I'm there, I might as well do the intake manifold gasket and then have a fresh start all the way from the bottom up. Could I partially do it? Certainly. But if you ever looked up Murphy's Law, type it in, it'll be okay. Look it up, and it'll tell you If I don't go to the intake manifold gasket, it will be the intake gasket, guaranteed. So I'm going to circumvent that, hopefully. That's the temp sensor going up to the gauge, which it was working, so I won't need to swap that. But we gotta have the wire off so we can pull the intake. Huh. It didn't drain so well, did it? This needs to burp. Let's get the center carb back off again. This carburetor's gonna be like, are you ever gonna leave me alone? Picking on me. There we go. Look at that. Block of wood broke. Amazing when you get stuff out of the way, it just lifts right up. I'm glad this isn't a cast iron one. Well, let's set it over here. Here's our intake manifold off, and well, as you can see, right here's one piece that's completely blown out. So that would be sucking air from the crankcase, still a vacuum leak. And my guess is it was leaking kind of everywhere else based on the amount of RTV that's in here. We're gonna put a little better gasket on it and reseal it. And I think we'll have our problem solved. There we go. Intake manifold's getting washed over there. I'm going to take a scraper, scrape off the surfaces where that manifold goes back down on. But I am going to put some white towels or some towels down in between, and just to minimize how much stuff I can't catch. It'll grab it. And then of course anything that does bounce on top, I'll just pick out by hand. But you want to send as little down the engine as possible. Intake surface on the engine all ready to go back as far as the intake is concerned, once the intake is clean. And but while I'm still here, I'm going to get my alternator out of the way so I can get to that fuel pump. And then I'm going to put a rubber line on the side that goes to the tank, run it into a bucket, but I'm going to try putting a little bit of air from the compressor on top of the tank through the filler neck and see if we can pressurize and push a little of that fluid out if it doesn't just roll out on its own. But at the same token, we'll put some pressure to it anyway and kind of help flush some of that out if there's anything in it, and be moving right along. Bloop, bloop. Probably shouldn't be kinked. We'll find a fix for that. I'm going to put a bunch of air into here, and yes, the tank is vented, but with the tank being vented, if I put more air into it, it should blow some of it out there, or at least create some head pressure on the fluid with this. And by the way, this shouldn't say fuel anymore. It should say foul, because that is the way it smells. It's nasty. That out of the way. Well, here it goes, nothing. It working? No? Even though I was losing a lot of air coming out of the big hole, I was getting enough air that I could hear the tank actually bulge out or oil can out. but still nothing down that way. So I'm going to back flush it, which means there's something in a line, which, let's see what we can do.
I think there's a plug.
So fuel line between this point, which is the pickup side of the pump, is a rubber line, a steel line, another rubber line, then the, call it the pickup or the sender, in this case it's a double, into the tank. So there might be enough stuff at the base of the tank that it's all gooked up. I don't remember if these have a sock on the end of them. I don't think they did. I know my 66 doesn't, so I don't know if they did that in 70 or not. But regardless, we're gonna work it that direction and see what happens. I'll start by pulling this rubber line off. Maybe we'll get lucky and it's just right here. We can cross our fingers. I can see you, John, see? Yeah. It's like a telescope, periscope. All right, so I need to move further back. It's not that little short line. It was a reach, but you never know. So I'll take and go all the way back further. But to do that, I'm gonna put it up in the air so I'm not crawling underneath it because I don't need to. But before I do that, I'm gonna get this off the bench, put it on the car so it's one less thing to have to think about later. It'll be done. All right, our car's up in the air and we can see our fuel tank, and most specifically, we can see where the sender is at. I'm gonna pull that rubber line. Hopefully there's something there. Otherwise, what we'll do is we'll blow some air up through the metal line going to the pump. That'll tell me if it's clear, and if that's not clear, then we're gonna have to pull the sender out because that's where it's gotta be. I don't think that rubber line's gonna be any good. I think I'll just cut it off. Let's see. Well, hopefully. Our line's clear, or at least now. Which it had fluid in it. It's interesting that it wouldn't push it forward. I think I'll still take this. I think I'll still take this out of here though. The line had some fuel in it, so that's a good sign. We blew it out. It smells really bad, which means the stuff in the tank isn't gonna smell any better or be any better. I think what I'll do though is I'm still gonna pull the sender out. Let's make sure that's good and clean so we're not fighting some other problem after we get everything cleaned out, blah, blah, blah. And then I think what I'll do is I'll just hook my electric fuel pump up to here to suck the tank empty. And we'll put it in a clear container so we can see it, just for posterity, I guess. And we'll go from there. Rinsing it, I'm not gonna pull it out, I'm sorry. Not gonna pull this out. I don't need to have the hassle of that. Ugh. Yuck. Yuck. That's disgusting. Well, kids, remember when I said I didn't want to pull the tank and create myself other problems? I'm not going to pull it out. I'm not going to pull it out. I'm not going to pull it out. If the fuel pickup looks like this, yeah, the tank looks exactly the same. Notice why we couldn't get any fuel going through it or blowing in and out of it? Because it is rotted shut. That's the inlet. And the float, well, the float's missing. It's not invisible. It should be right here on this thing. There's a float right there. Possibly a brass one, but it's gone. So, we gotta find a new, well, wouldn't have to find a new tube, but probably be nice if the gas gauge worked. Yuck! We dropped the tank out. It was full of crud. And really the biggest thing was is at some point in time it had the gas tank renew done, and that rubber bladder was just drooping and falling apart. So with the magic of some editing, we were a couple days later and voila, we have a brand new tank. And this is what a new one should look like on the outside, of course. And if you remember our, well, just briefly, right? This is the old, and if you've never seen a new one, this is what it should look like. Right down to a sock and a float, and not crusty and rusty. And you can blow through this one, like that. Not even touching that one. Couple of alignment tabs on there. Boom, that's in. Slide the lock collar on there, like that. And get it started. And yes, you're 100% correct. A flat punch would have worked a whole lot better, but you know what? It's still in. Done. Ready to go back in. I'm going to put a little bit of grease of some fashion on my filler tube. Whoops. Jeez. Must be in a hurry. I believe this was on here like so. It does, doesn't it? It's match. It matches this way. Trying to do this so poetic with the camera rolling, right? That's what people don't realize. Rotted piece of metal in the way. Want everybody to get the full experience. This is what it's really like. This is the therapy. This is therapy. You have an issue with patience? This will teach you patience. Fuel tank is installed. Gonna move forward on the fuel system here. Got a rubber line into a fresh pump. I need to make a line going up to the intake, but obviously you can see I need to put the intake back on, reseal it, put the valve covers back on. That'll kind of button that up, get rid of that intake leak or the vacuum leak. And we'll be able to move forward to putting some fresh carburetors on it. As you can see, we have carbs with the actual pods on it. So that's a step in the right direction. These are vacuum, call it vacuum secondaries. So in other words, it runs on the center carburetor, which is a 500 CFM carburetor for the majority of the time until you really get after it. Then the back and front 350 each CFM carburetors would come in based on vacuum. So we need to work that out, and of course the linkage and some of that stuff. So it's going to be a little bit time consuming for my end. So we're going to roll in a little quick speed with time lapse and go on. Now I feel the need to say this. I'm not restoring the car. I'm just trying to get it running. I want to put a smile on the owner's face, and then he's going to take it from there. Okay? Cool. All right. I get to work. So this has 3 carburetors together, and it utilizes basically, call it fuel brake line, same line, and has little short chunks and your adapters. So I went to Inline Tube, and I bought their kit for the carburetors. Now this kit did not come with the part that goes to the pump. So fortunately I do have this, because this particular piece would have been a bear to actually bend correctly, given that this is my bender, right? But when I go to do the pump side of it, it'll work quite well. So I have it started, and we'll show you here in the car in a little bit, but basically come through, do we bend, The key is with a bender is that you don't kink it. This was done by hand or whatever. It is what you got to do, but if you got a bender, works very well. That's how we're going to do this. I think that covers it. Let's get going. All right, well, hey, we have our carburetors on. As you can see, we have the vacuum potted secondary carburetors and also have all of our linkage hooked up here. We had to make a little bit of a customized stud to go on the throttle, but it seems like it's gonna work fantastic. So we have that. I need to fill the coolant and put some more gas in it and put the battery in and fire it up. So I don't have my coolant on life support system, even though it does look like it with all these hoses, but here's the idea. A trick way to do this. Using compressed air in this apparatus pulls a vacuum on the coolant system, shut off the source, turn on the coolant, sucks it right in. Or you can do it the old-fashioned way, put it on a hill, up at an angle, try to burp it. This does a remarkable job. Check it out. Here we go. You should hold on to this, because otherwise it does this. It's not a big deal. But as soon as I flip this, if I'm doing things right, there it goes. I had it on already. So here we're pulling vacuum. This is a vacuum gauge. This is also a good way to check to see if you have any leaks in your cooling system. Because if it won't hold a lot of vacuum, then you got problems. But you can see here that I've pulled the upper hose dead tight. You don't have to be as messy as I was. But right to the top. There you go. Not sure how I'm going to get it back in. Here, how's that? Negative. Go stronger. Just checking. I got an electric funnel. We're going green with an electric funnel. That's all there is to it. Fuel. We have our coolant filled. We have our gas tank filled. We actually just replaced this ignition module because it was starting to, well, you can see the old one was leaking because it was getting hot. And we're all ready to go. But wait, there's more. We forgot to put the vacuum line so these vacuum pods will actually work. So it comes off a ported vacuum from the metering block, tees over to these, vacuum opens them up. So a little custom routing, then we'll be good to go. So we got our vacuum line on to the front and rear carburetor. I'm just going to fill the center float a little bit so it has some amount of fuel in it. That way I don't have to wait so long for it to come up the fuel line. We'll watch here though, obviously as we crank it over, it'll show that we get fuel in the filter nicely. I don't have to get too excited about filling the rears, front or rears. Oh yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Okay. What do you think? Think she'll work? Let's give it a shot. Pedal feels good. God, that starter sounds horrible. That's better.
Get it warmed up here a little bit. It's gonna sound rough because that header's all rotted out, but
Well, we got a little heat in it, so let's see if we can drive it around the block, around the building here a little bit, and then let's see if she goes. Sounds pretty mean. It's gonna need a little bit to warm up. Got good oil pressure. If she comes up on some temperature, it'll be all right. It's cold-blooded. "25, 30 years, and now we're going down the road." Just like that. A little rough around the edges. But hey, we're going down the road. Something this has not done. I'm gonna go straight. Not bad. The handles actually cool. Very well. Well, I don't know what you thought, but that was fantastic. The car's running and driving. It's a whole lot cleaner than when it was a few weeks ago. And you know what? For us, this is a wrap. We're gonna take this back to the owner, and if you happen to be local to Traverse City, you just might see it cruising around town. And I know when I see it, I'm gonna have a big grin on my face because I think it's cool. And with that, get out in the shop, go get your work done, have some fun. See ya.